All right, so let's talk about how to set up for the Great One. All right, so here on REVONTULI, right, there's a couple things that I focused on. This highway on the south side that separates the marshy land and the ocean front from the mainland and up into the mountains. Don't waste your time going south of this highway. There's nothing there. The other thing, I focused a lot on looking at the bodies of water and finding need zones for drinking times, and I set up according to that, right? So your need zones for whitetail are from 8:30 to 12. Now this is important because if you set up a tent and a tripod or a tent and a tree stand at 8:30 and you're jumping around from zone to zone, you're not necessarily going to find any whitetail at 8:30 simply because they're moving from their rest zone, right, wherever their rest zone is at, to their next need zone for drink, etc. So normally what I do is I'll set it for 8:45 and then I'll start hopping around. I'll walk you through quickly each of the zones that I set up at, where I put my tents, where I put my tripods, and why, and how yours are going to differ. So for example, I think this one is mostly going to be the same for everybody. There's one or two zones right here. I think I blew one of them away. There's two zones here, two zones here. I have seen on some maps where there's a zone here, and you can essentially be right in the middle, and you can put a tent there. It'll be 150 meters away from the need zone. So the reason that's important is I've noticed when your tent is within 150 meters or 150 yards, I use yards in this as the measurement, none of the animals will actually come to use that need zone. So you want to make sure you zoom in, right click, press a waypoint, and then when you fast travel to these locations and you look at your waypoint that you set, you want to make sure that you're about at least 150 away, right? So this is 163, so I'm safe. Within 150, they won't show up, okay? So as we can see, it's 12:15 right now. We're getting later, but they're still there. So if we switch to the binoculars, we can see that, you know, we've got the whitetail, but they look like they're leaving, so they're on their way out, right? Oh boy. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and rest, and I'm going to drop this to 8:45, like I said. And then what I'll do is I'll show you some of the other zones that I have set up and why this exact setup won't work for you, but this is the idea that you want to follow. So here we are, 8:45 on the northeast side. This is always where I like to start, simply because there's so many zones right off the bat that you can see, and if you don't have a tent right away, the house is super close. So I found out that by having my house here, I just threw up a tree stand in one of these trees, and I was able to hit, at the time, I think there was 3 zones that I could see from this one tree stand. So it was very easy to port here, hop in a tree stand, and then pick everything off. Why do you want to use a tree stand or a tripod? So when I say blow away a zone, if I was to run over to one of these drink zones on the ground and I shot 4 animals, right, that would eliminate that need zone, and I'd have to wait for all of this hunting pressure to go away, and then the animals would come back in a new spot, right? So that's important though, because you can use that to your advantage, where if you have a need zone, like let's say it's right here, and that's within 150 yards from my tent, right? Basically what I can do is I can blow that zone away and it'll reappear somewhere else here. So there's always going to be a set number of zones per area, right? And they will come back, but it takes a while. So from here, if we go just north of it, I've only ever seen 2 at a time on this particular area. I'm set up with a tent and then a tree stand overlooking 2 need zones. I had it earlier where I had a need zone on the south and I had a need zone on the north. That worked out really well. So if we move west of that and we come here, now this one's kind of a big deal, and it's a bit awkward, right? So as you can see, I have my tent, I have a tripod, and then there's this. I don't recommend building this. It doesn't do anything for you. I wasted the money on it. So anyway, learn from my mistakes. So this tripod actually is, its only purpose is to look at this zone right here. And if I see something in this zone, I'll shoot it from the tripod. So back to why tripods are important. If you are on the ground and you shoot 4 animals, it blows away the need zone and you have to wait until the hunting pressure dies for it to come back. But if you're in a tripod or if you're in a tree stand, I think it's like you can shoot up to 16, and I think on the 16th animal, it's when it'll blow the need zone away. So it's important when you need to harvest a bunch of deer, and I'll get to that in a minute, because there's something that was going around of, well, you only shoot 2 or only shoot 3 bucks out of a herd at a time, and that's not the rule that I followed, right? I blew the 2 zones away on this and they never came back, so I'm not sure what's going on there. This can be highly densely populated with whitetail, and then this area right here, this is where I got my great one. So there was actually 4 need zones, and one of the need zones was right here. And while I was on my way, you can see it in the video, while I was on my way over to pick up a couple of deer that I had shot from my tripod, the great one came down and I ended up shooting him, and there was just too much hunting pressure overall and it blew the need zones away. But I didn't care, because the whole point was to get him to show up, right? So here's another area that there's got 3 need zones on. The idea is you want to focus on the areas that are going to attract the most amount of whitetail. So the more need zones you can have in a specific area, the higher likelihood you're going to have of getting that great one to spawn. And then down here, I kind of set up this nice flow. I haven't had much luck with these bottom lakes, but these top lakes here seem to work out well. This house is close enough. I didn't feel the need to put a tent. I only ever see them on the north and south. I forget how this showed up, but I've only ever seen, oh, that's because it's moose, so it makes sense. So north and south for me. I do have a tent here, which I'll run left, hit that, and then I'll port back, and then I'll run north, and then I'll hit these need zones. And then from there, I have a tent that ports up here, and this has got 3 whitetail zones. Now these are a bit spread out. So this is an example of, if let's say you don't like this zone that's here on the south, you can just run down here and shoot all the deer, blow this zone away and wait, and it'll have a chance to respawn somewhere, hopefully closer to the other 2 zones that you've got. So it's not always a negative to burn a zone, but you can burn them if it makes sense for you. And then this is a rather large lake, and I did figure out, I think, a good way to get around it for at least how my need zones popped up. So I'll land on my tent here, I'll glass this. If I don't see anything there, I'll turn around and I'll glass this area. It looks like I might have burned that, so that's gone. So I would turn around and glass here. I could port back to my tent if I wanted to, take the boat across, and then glass and hit these 2 spots. And then it's a short walk over to this. So in just this area, I think there was like 6 zones at one point in time that I'd run through. Now this one took a little while longer because of the distance I'd have to run, but there were some big whitetail there. This is small, this little double lake side by side, but this has been my favorite so far. Even though it's only 1 need zone, my ability to hit the tent, run to the tripod, and then see what's there, and then hit it and leave was super effective, right? I enjoyed that a lot. This particular lake, I think it has, what's this, 4 need zones on it. So I put my tent where I can reach 3 of them relatively easily if I want. And then the furthest south that I've gone for the need zones is on this river here. You can see that looks like somebody, maybe it was me. I do host multiplayer games, so it may not have been, probably was. There was a need zone here. And honestly, you can get this set up on your map well enough where you'll port, look, decide whether or not you're going to take the animals or not, and then move on to the next area. So now I want to talk about actually harvesting the animals. So this is where I think that what I'm about to say kind of differs from what other people have said on YouTube. And what I want to say is it's okay to shoot the does, right? In fact, that's how I think that I got the great one to spawn. So what ends up happening is you notice you come in here, like there's a good looking one, right? He's a 245, he's a 200, he's a 214. So this is a good set, right? So these three are nice and big. But what happens when you have a zone that when you show up and they're all small, they're like 100s, and they're all like, let's say there's 6 does and 2 100 point bucks, right? What do? Well, in my understanding of this was, well, why don't I just start shooting the does as well as the bucks in order to completely eliminate them and get a new herd to spawn in, right? So it's kind of like herd cycling. You cycle the herd out. Because I noticed even quitting to the main menu and then jumping back into the game, I noticed all of the animals not just had similar points, they had the exact same points. And that was pretty frustrating for me. So I thought to myself, well, why don't, like, this is a good example. So we've got one, he's kind of big, so it's not really a great example. But so scratch him, right, ignore him. But you see we've got this one that's a 187, and then there's 3 does. And you end up seeing this a lot when you start grinding and you just take the bucks out of the herds. Well, what I found is that if I just eliminate the herd, it'll pull a new herd in. And that's what we saw at this last area here, where all of a sudden they were back up into the 240s, 220s, 240s, etc. So when I had started eliminating the does, that was probably around 700 kills, I want to say. And then it only was about 2 days worth. So when I say 2 days, that means from 8:45 to 12:30. So 2 cycles of that, of running this 2 more times after I started harvesting does. And that's when the great one showed up, right? Just kind of out of the blue. And honestly, I think that was the secret to it, because I've heard of people that, they're in the thousands, and they're not seeing what they want to see. And here at the end of the day, I'm less. I guarantee I'm less than 800 kills in, and it just worked out, So the other thing I want to talk about guns really quick, because this is something that one of the viewers that hopped in the other day with me told me to do, because I was using the 308 to harvest all of the deer. And then I moved on to the red deer, and I realized the 308 was not cutting it. If you pull out this 30-06 and you use the 30-06 to start shooting these guys, I'm telling you what, it will make your day. It's going to make a huge difference in taking down these animals. I must have had a horrible shot placement there, so obviously I'm a liar. So let's go here. Let's see if I can hit something really quick for you. But as far as setup, I know a lot of people have asked me what was my setup, what did I do. I think that my setup is it's very similar to what anybody else is going to do. I think that the big change, the big factor of what I did differently than what has been going around YouTube is that I started harvesting the does when I noticed that the bucks were getting small, right? Not a huge, it's not some earth-shattering deal, right? It's nothing too crazy, but it did seem to work out for me, and I got it done in just a couple of kills. So I don't know why you're out here, but okay, so that's 326 yards, right? So this 30-06 has been impressive to me so far. And I think that if you can get the 30-06, the bolt action's fine, but this M1's better. Now, another thing I want to bring up, I don't know, this is a disclaimer, I don't know if it has anything to do with the random number generator in the game or not. I do not show up, kill the deer, leave the deer, and then quit to the menu in order for them to disappear. I don't do that. I'll go every time that I kill one, I say that, and then there's that 245 that probably is just now dying in the woods that we just shot before this doe. But high 90 percentile of the time, I'll go and I'll pick up the deer and harvest them. So no idea if that helps or hurts, but it worked for me. So, you know, last time, I think the big points are find the bodies of water that have the most amount of need zones. Target those first, especially if you haven't used the money cheat, like I haven't used the money cheat, you're going to get more mileage out of more need zones. So focus the bigger bodies of water on the northern part, collect as many of the drinking need zones as you can, and then set up your tent in tripod or tree stand accordingly, and then just start to cycle through them, collect, and then as you build your money up, you can start to branch out and you can start to do these singles, right? Where I have a whole, you know, tent and tree stand or tripod right here for just this one zone. Those are things that you can do later once you get to the point where you can afford it. But other than that, there's no other tricks. There's no secret sauce. I think the does, harvesting the does is the main point. And cycling the herd, right? So if you can cycle the herd out, you'll bring in new bucks, you'll bring in new does, etc. But I wanted to keep this video short, sweet, to the point. I hope this was helpful. If you've got any questions, let me know. Shoot me a comment, shoot me a message. I will be happy to answer them as much as I can. All right, thanks. Take care. See ya.